And this is Speaking of Writers. I'm Steve Richards. My guest today is Stan Kasprzyk. Stan's new debut novel is Suspended in Vast Plain. The events portrayed in this memoir split Stan's life into two parts, almost equal in duration. Born in Poland and separated from most of Europe and the world by the Iron Curtain, he had a peaceful childhood in a middle-class family. He enjoyed his schools and teachers and completed his education by reading economics. He was also a lecturer and researcher. He's worked as a software engineer on many exciting projects in both the US and Canada. This is, again, his debut novel, Suspended in Vast Plain, and happy to have Stan join me here on Speaking of Writers. Welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you, Steve.
So first off, Stan, what gave you the idea to write a novel?
Well, there's always a number of factors in such an important events, undertakings. One, I was thinking about writing something, but I had no way to approach it. I felt that, I mean, there were some failures on the way. I tried in Polish, by the way, but it didn't got any traction. I retired, and I had a meeting. I described the event in the preface to the book. There was a meeting, and I saw an excitement in the eyes of three interlocutors, three ladies, my friends from work, when I started talking about my adventures in Africa. And Africa seemed to be original place, unusual place, exotic. So I thought that might be of interest to some readers. And obviously later I found that I had to learn the craft hard way.
It was a critical time politically in Poland in the 80s. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, it was going towards the end of communism and the whole Soviet system, but nobody knew about it. Nobody would expect that it will crack so quickly, and it was a big turmoil. Not very bloody. There were some casualties of the confrontation. So basically, in the 70s, the economy originally was okay. The problems, obviously, it was on the borrowed money. The economy was inefficient, and then everything collapsed around 1980, and then workers started to protest, solidarity movement like Valenza, and it went on for almost 15, 16 months, and finally the communist authority decided to crack it down to stop those protests. It was martial law. The President Reagan reacted to that with sanctions, and I left actually Poland some year and a half after the martial law was introduced.
And where did you go first from Poland?
I went straight to Yola, to Nigeria, to Africa, to West Africa. The system was mostly hanging on the power of the Secret Service, as most of the time under communism, and they allowed people, those who are contesting or not quiet, they wanted them to push away. That's what I was thinking, and I got a contract. Nigeria was at that time rich with oil revenues. Poland had lots of contesting specialists unhappy with their life and prospects in Poland, so I was one of them.
You learned a lot from reading Time magazine. And it was a ritual in your family, right? They were political.
Well, yes, my father was. My father was mostly back in Poland. He didn't speak English. He knew German somewhat, but mostly he was getting news from the world through Radio Free Europe, from Washington Radio, Voice of America, it was called, and from Montreal, from BBC London, in Polish. And he had a pretty good view, because the comments were were based on what the Western news had at that time. So I listened to him, his stories, and I also sometimes listened to the radio. And once I was in Nigeria, I found that there is only one, basically one source of information from the world, which was Time magazine.
We're chatting with Stan Kasprzyk here on Speaking of Writers. His new book, his debut novel, is called Suspended in Vast Plain. What was the research like for this novel? And did you keep a journal all those years?
No, unfortunately, I was reckless in this way, and I just remembered certain events. Then I had my wife there. Maybe I'm a little bit spoiling here the story, but my wife joined me in Africa, in Yola, and she remembered also quite a lot. She had some letters from that time. I didn't I couldn't find any letters in our archives, our family archives. So she was kind of a supporting bank of data. And many times I said, "Hey, Basha," her first name, "do you remember this and this?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, again, this book." And so she provided me with lots of, half of the anecdotes, basically. But obviously there was a need for some research in terms of dates, history. I looked into my documents, my passport, my stamps in the passport, some other documents to timeline the event.
So you're in this remote African town. How did that influence your thinking, in the third world in general?
Well, that's a great question. I think in ways I differ from what people when I found later in North America think about the third world or undeveloped countries or developing countries, as we call them now. I tend to understand. I was shocked basically when I saw it first. Because Poland was a socialist country, was egalitarian, and there is no egalitarianism. There is lots of feudalism there, right? There are so-called traditional rulers in Nigeria. They influence. They are the chancellors of universities. And there is a lot of tradition. And actually, when I go back now, after those 33 years, I see more and more traditions coming up. Although we know that this part of Nigeria, the eastern, northeastern corner of Nigeria, Maiduguri, Yola, those places are the place of those places are where the clashes between Maitatsine, Maitatsine, it was my time. Now it's called Boko Haram movements, Islamic movements, take place. People are killed, markets are bombed, schoolgirls are kidnapped and raped, and all bad things. I mean, this is Islamic corner, if you will, of the world.
Stan, how often do you get back to Nigeria?
Oh, I never been to Nigeria. I never traveled. I always go by by means of news and internet, I keep interested. I'm interested in what's going on and try to understand. It's you know, maybe I understand a little bit more better than those people who didn't see this firsthand. But you know, it's going through. I mean, Nigeria is a huge country. It's 200 million. It's important. It's growing. And to understand, it's so you know, for the American foreign policy leaders, it's important to understand Nigeria, I think.
You had mentioned that creative writing of memoir calls for all devices of storytelling. Expand on that a little bit. What did you mean by that?
Well, you know, my father, who was during World War II, was a POW in a German camp. He was a physician, a military physician during the war in 1939. Was taken to prison, and he wrote his memoir. And when I look at this, it is just facts. It is pretty dry, although you see some emotions, and this was my model of memoir. And then when I got to the courses that are offered in Toronto by School Board, I found that it is totally different now ball game. It's just you know, you have to create a dramatic line. You have to develop your characters. You simply don't want to blast the reader with. It has to be action. It has to be enticing. It has to be, you know, thrilling to most of the time. So then obviously courses one thing. You spend so many hours a week, but you have more time to read about this. And there is a big material volume of text and videos on internet about storytelling. It is a storytelling, and I felt that I'm not a good storyteller altogether at the beginning, and then I just jumped on that and learned over, and I mean, tons of material were dig over, and I think I found my way to. And the other factor is that in the course, when I started writing the episodes, there are 42 two chapters in the book. So each chapter was presented, you know, with a first or second draft, let's say, in the class, and it was critiqued or criticized, and I learned that it has to have the dramatic line. That has to be some tension, and then a resolution at the end. And this is how I build those 42 stories, so to say. And then working on the structure of the book, I also found some lines of rising and falling lines of drama in 4 parts of the book, right? They are kind of separate, chronologically mostly, by chronology. And there is the drama of an entire book, of the whole, you know, getting used to the Western world in a way, in the wild country, in a remote place in Africa. But still, you know, there were lots of people from United States, from Denmark, from Italy, from Egypt. I was exposed to so many people, and there was, I think, the line building that I was just getting experience. I experienced the West, and I found that it's not such a bad thing to be in.
And Stan, finally, what would you like readers to take away from Suspended in Vast Plain?
Well, that's a routine question, I would say, but I think there's a number of things. I obviously, my experience is not so close related to what people experience, what young person, like, you know, around 20 in the 20s or early 30s have in America, in Canada, in the Western world. But the one thing is that you don't, the idea that you might be at the beginning of your life path at the bottom of your expectations. You have to put your hard work, you have to endure a lot. You don't have to look to expect the outcome right away. For a period of time, you might be in a difficult position, and that there will be people looking, you know, you don't want to be envy to other people in this period of time. Mm-hmm. The other thing is it is a lot of decision making at this age. You have to figure out what you are and what are your preferences in life, what you like, how you are adjusting to the world, whether you can handle other people and so on, and how they take you. And in all this decision making, you have to be, I think, rather rational. You have to build your rationality. You don't have to be misdirected by quick emotions. Obviously, emotions, we are emotional. There is no doubt about it. No denial. But you know, you have to build your thinking about life, your philosophy, let's say.
This book, Suspended in Vast Plain, is available at writersrepublic.com, also amazon.com, and Barnes & Noble as well. The author is Stan Kasprzyk. Stan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Steve.
And this is Speaking of Writers.